Let me ask you something. If someone told you they earn $65,000 a year, which, by the way, is close to the U.S. median household income, would you say they're doing okay? Most people would say yes, 65,000. That sounds stable. That sounds like enough. But here's the thing nobody talks about at that salary level. After federal taxes, state taxes, Social Security, and Medicare, depending on where you live, that person is likely taking home somewhere between $48,000 and $52,000 a year. Call it $4,000 a month, give or take. Now, rent in a mid-sized American city, Austin, Denver, Nashville, Charlotte, is sitting somewhere between $1,400 and $1,900 for a decent one-bedroom. Let's call it $1,600. That's $2,400 left. Car payment, because in most American cities a car is not optional, $450 a month. Insurance on that car, $150. Gas, $120. That's $1,680 left. Groceries, phone, internet, maybe a gym membership, utilities, that's another $600 conservatively. That leaves $1,080 for everything else. Student loan repayment, clothes, medical co-pays, a birthday dinner, a weekend trip your coworkers are all going on, that new iPhone that just came out. And you know what most people do with that $1,080? They spend it every single month. They spend it and they feel vaguely anxious about money, but they're not sure exactly why, because after all, they have a job, a decent job. They're doing okay. This video is about that vague anxiety, where it actually comes from, what's quietly causing it, and why it follows people even when they get raises. Let me introduce you to a character. His name is James. He's 29 years old. He lives in a mid-sized American city, let's say Columbus, Ohio. He works in marketing. He earns $67,000 a year. James is not reckless. He's not stupid. He doesn't buy Lamborghinis or blow money at casinos. He pays his bills. He shows up to work. He considers himself financially responsible. But James has almost nothing saved. And he can't quite figure out why. Because when he looks at his spending, really looks at it, nothing seems obviously wrong. The rent is what it is. The car was necessary. The student loans are just there. The credit card gets paid off, mostly. James is living inside what I'd call the middle-class financial illusion, the belief that because you're not doing anything dramatically wrong, you must be doing okay. But the traps James has fallen into aren't dramatic. They're quiet. They're structural. They were built into the decisions he made years ago, some of which he didn't even feel like decisions at the time. And here's the uncomfortable part. James exists in almost every country in the developed world. In the UK, he earns £38,000 and lives in Manchester or Bristol. In Germany, he earns €42,000 and lives in Leipzig or Dusseldorf. In France, he earns €35,000 and lives just outside Paris because Paris itself is simply not affordable anymore. The names change, the currencies change, the numbers shift slightly, but the structure of the trap is almost identical. So let's go through it, slowly, calmly, trap by trap. The first trap is so common that most people don't even consider it a trap. They consider it just growing up. It's called lifestyle inflation, and it happens the moment your income goes up. James got a raise at 27. He went from $52,000 to $67,000. That's a $15,000 increase, roughly $900 extra per month after taxes. What did James do? He moved into a nicer apartment. His rent went from $1,100 to $1,600. That's $500 more per month. He finally got a newer car. His car payment went from $280 to $450. That's $170 more per month. He started eating out more because he could, another $150 per month, roughly. Total new spending, $820 more per month, out of a $900 raise. James feels like he leveled up, but financially he's almost exactly where he was before, except now his baseline costs are permanently higher. So when the next raise comes, the same thing happens again. This isn't a character flaw. This is deeply human. Psychologists call it hedonic adaptation, the tendency of humans to return to a baseline level of happiness regardless of what changes in their external circumstances. We upgrade, we adjust, we normalize, and then we want the next upgrade. The financial system, by the way, is designed around this. Apartment complexes know you'll stretch for something nicer. Car dealerships know what monthly payment you'll tolerate. Nobody is selling you a number, they're selling you a feeling, and they're very good at it. The people who escape this trap don't have more willpower, they just build the system differently. When the raise comes, the first $300 or $400 goes somewhere that doesn't produce a lifestyle feeling, an index fund, an emergency account, an extra mortgage payment. The lifestyle upgrade, if it happens at all, is modest and deliberate. Not exciting, but over 10 years, the math is completely different. Let's talk about the car, because in the United States especially, this is one of the most expensive and least examined financial decisions most people make. James bought a 2021 Honda Accord. Not flashy, sensible even. He financed it for 72 months, 6 years, at $450 per month. That's $32,400 in payments. The car was priced at about $29,000, but with interest over 6 years, James pays closer to $32,400. Fine, acceptable, most people would say. But here's what the dealership didn't put on a poster. Insurance, $150 per month. Over 6 years, that's $10,800. Gas, $120 per month. Over 6 years, that's $8,640. Maintenance, tires, oil, brakes, registration, conservatively $100 per month. That's $7,200. Total cost of that sensible Honda Accord over 6 years is approximately $58,000 to $60,000 on a car that, by the end of those 6 years, is worth maybe $12,000. Now, I'm not saying James shouldn't have a car. In Columbus, Ohio, he almost certainly needs one. The point is that the true cost of car ownership is roughly double what most people mentally budget for, and that difference is silently consuming a significant portion of their monthly income every single month for years. The same dynamic exists in Europe, just slightly differently shaped. In the UK and France, car costs are lower in some areas, but fuel and insurance tend to be high. In Germany, where car culture is almost a religion, people regularly finance vehicles they genuinely cannot afford without stress. Financially literate people aren't necessarily people who don't have cars. They're people who calculated the full number, not just the monthly payment, before they signed. And many of them, when they run that calculation, end up driving something considerably less impressive.
There is a version of debt that is aggressive and obvious. Gambling debt, payday loans, that kind of thing. Most people in the middle class avoid that kind of debt. They know it's dangerous. But there's another kind of debt. The kind that doesn't feel dangerous at all. The kind that feels like everyone has it. Student loans, credit cards with a revolving balance, buy now, pay later installments, store financing, a personal loan to cover a vacation. James has $34,000 in student loans. His minimum payment is $320 per month. He's been paying for 4 years. He still owes $29,000 because most of those early payments went to interest, not principal. He also has a credit card with a $2,800 balance. He pays the minimum every month, which is about $70. At 22% APR, the interest on that balance is roughly $50 per month. So of his $70 payment, only $20 is actually reducing the debt. At that rate, that $2,800 takes over a decade to pay off and costs him well over $4,000 in total. None of this feels alarming to James because everyone he knows is in a similar situation.
His coworker has $60,000 in student loans. His cousin just did a buy now, pay later on a couch. His friend put a vacation on a card and isn't stressing about it. Normalized debt is one of the most effective financial traps in the modern middle-class world, not because any single debt is catastrophic, but because the cumulative weight of multiple small obligations means that a significant portion of every paycheck is committed before it even arrives. James isn't spending $1,080 freely every month. Before he even touches discretionary spending, $390 of that is going to service debt, money that produces no asset, no return, nothing except the gradual elimination of a number that shouldn't have grown that large in the first place. In Europe, the student loan burden tends to be lower, particularly in Germany, Scandinavia, and France, where university costs are heavily subsidized. But consumer credit card debt is rising across the UK, France, and Spain. And buy now, pay later platforms have exploded across the continent, creating a generation of young professionals who technically don't carry credit card balances but are permanently financing their everyday purchases in small, invisible installments. The trap looks different. The mechanism is the same.
Ask most people in the middle class whether they have an emergency fund, and they'll say, yeah, kind of. I've got some money in my checking account. That's not an emergency fund. That's just money that hasn't been spent yet. James has about $800 in his checking account at any given time. He considers this his cushion. Then his car needs a brake job, $680. He pays it, but his account is essentially empty for the next 2 weeks. So when his dentist visit comes up, $320 after insurance, he puts it on the credit card. Now, his credit card balance just went from $2,800 to $3,120. The debt he was slowly paying off just grew. This is the cycle that keeps millions of middle-class people in a permanent state of financial fragility. Not poverty, fragility. There's an important distinction. They have income, they have jobs, but there's no buffer between ordinary life and debt accumulation, which means that every unexpected expense, and unexpected expenses happen multiple times every year for everyone, pushes them slightly further into the hole. Financial planners recommend 3 to 6 months of expenses as an emergency fund. For James, that's somewhere between $12,000 and $24,000. That number sounds absurd to him right now. It sounds like something rich people have. But the interesting thing is that building that fund doesn't require being rich. It requires a period, maybe 18 to 24 months, where lifestyle expansion is frozen and a fixed portion of every paycheck goes somewhere separate and untouched. Not glamorous, not content-worthy, but it changes the entire psychological experience of having a job and earning money. Because at some point, when the car needs brakes, the answer is, I have money for that, instead of, there goes the card again.
Here is a piece of math that most 25 to 32-year-olds have heard, but haven't genuinely internalized. If James invests $300 per month starting at age 27 and earns an average annual return of 7%, which is a conservative, historically grounded estimate for a basic index fund, by the time he's 62, he has approximately $880,000. If he waits until 37 to start and does the exact same thing, $300 a month at 7%, he has approximately $390,000 at 62. Same monthly amount, same return, 10 years of delay, less than half the result. That 10-year gap, his 20s, is the single most financially valuable decade of his life, and most people in the middle class spend it telling themselves they'll start investing when things settle down, when the loans are paid, when the salary is higher, when the timing is better. The timing never feels better. And the tragedy isn't that people don't know this. Most people have heard a version of compound interest explained at some point. The tragedy is that at 28, retirement at 62 feels like someone else's problem, another person in another life, future James. Future James will sort it out. Present James, meanwhile, is financing a slightly nicer lifestyle, an extra $200 on rent, an upgrade on the car, a few more dinners out, that he would barely notice if it were quietly redirected toward a retirement account instead. This is not about guilt. It's about a cognitive bias that every human has, what psychologists call hyperbolic discounting, the tendency to massively overvalue the present over the future. We're wired for it. A dollar today feels more real than a dollar in 30 years. The system around us, advertising, social media, consumer culture, exploits that wiring constantly. The small number of people who build real wealth over ordinary careers aren't necessarily smarter or higher earning. They're people who found a way to make future them feel real enough to invest in.
This one is the most subtle trap, and in some ways the most powerful, because it doesn't feel like a financial decision at all. It feels like living your life. James's colleagues are going to a rooftop bar for someone's birthday. The bill, split 8 ways, comes to $95. James didn't particularly want to go, but he went, because not going feels worse than the $95. His friends are doing a weekend trip to Chicago. Hotels, transport, food, about $380 for the weekend. James is not in a position to comfortably spend $380 on a weekend, but declining feels like exclusion. So he goes, and he puts it on the card. There's a name for this. Economists call it social consumption, spending driven not by personal desire, but by the perceived need to maintain social standing or avoid the discomfort of being visibly less affluent than your peers. In the U.S., this is amplified by the fact that American social culture is unusually consumption-centered. Where you eat, what you wear, what car you drive, where you vacation, these are social signals, consciously or not. In Europe, the pressure is somewhat different in texture, but equally present. In the UK, the pub culture means a round of drinks for a group can easily cost £50. In France, maintaining a certain aesthetic, the right neighborhood, the right wardrobe, is a quiet but persistent social expectation. The cost of social consumption for someone like James is hard to calculate precisely because it's scattered across dozens of small decisions throughout the year. But if you add it up honestly, the events you attended without wanting to, the trips you took because everyone was going, the rounds you bought because it was your turn, it's often somewhere between $3,000 and $6,000 per year for a typical person in this income bracket. That's not nothing. Over 5 years, that's a down payment. So after going through all of this, the lifestyle inflation, the real cost of the car, the normalized debt, the missing emergency fund, the delayed retirement thinking, the invisible social spending, what's the actual difference between someone who falls into these traps and someone who doesn't? It's almost never income. There are people earning $110,000 a year who are as financially fragile as James. And there are people earning $55,000 who are quietly building something real. The difference is a particular way of seeing money, not as something to optimize or restrict, but as something to be honest about. Financially grounded people tend to calculate the full cost of things, not just the monthly payment. They treat their future self as a real person with real needs, not a hypothetical. They build buffers before they build lifestyle. They're not immune to social pressure, but they've developed a quiet tolerance for occasionally disappointing people. They don't have a special spreadsheet. They don't follow a complicated system. They've just stopped pretending that ignoring something makes it smaller. The most important thing James could do, right now, not when things are better, is simply look at the full picture, not to punish himself, not to feel guilty about the dinners or the car or the apartment, just to see it clearly, because you can't navigate something you refuse to look at. That's it, really. The trap isn't the debt or the car or the lifestyle. The trap is the story we tell ourselves that says everything is probably fine and I'll think about it later. Most people never think about it later. Later turns into always.
If you made it this far,
I want to say something clearly. Nothing in this video is meant to make you feel bad about where you are. The systems we've talked about, lifestyle inflation, debt normalization, social spending pressure, these aren't personal failures. They're structural. They're designed into the environment most of us live in. Awareness doesn't fix everything, but it changes the relationship between you and the decision, and that, over time, changes the outcome. James is going to be okay if he starts looking clearly. If this kind of calm, honest conversation about money is something you want more of, without the hype, without the fake urgency, there's a subscribe button somewhere near this video. That's all. No pressure, no gimmick. See you in the next one.